Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. You've gone out of shot. Drop yourself, tip yourself back a little bit. Or you, whichever, the camera or yourself. Cool. That's it. I like that. That's the Patrice I know. Okay. So today I'm talking with Patrice Naiambana. Patrice,
Hi. How you
you
doing?
have quite a journey. Born in Ghana, ended up working at the RSC and many other arts venues and stuff in the UK. Can you just give us a really exciting but brief description of your journey?
Uh, Hi everybody. How you doing? Thank you so much, Robin, for inviting me into your village. um, yes, my journey started in Sierra Leone, West Africa, watching people talking and selling in marketplaces, looking at masquerades and songs and events where there was always music and song and food, um, to the need to use stories to address change and human flourishing. And that took me all the way to having to invent my own opportunities. Um, and then in England, I went to street theater, call it street theater, but busking, busking. And I couldn't really play that many instruments, but I would play whatever I could so that I could earn travel card so I could get to the next place of learning or opportunity. That went to TIE, Theatre and Education, Community Theatre, Black Theatre in the early 90s, and then to radio and television and bits of film. And in between, I was getting closer and closer, more experience to theatre. But all along, I was still practicing um, skills in order to deliver in community spaces or what I call diverse environments. So I was always transferring my experience into the so-called other space, right? A non-exclusive space or community spaces. And yeah, so that's been my journey. But all along the way, there were key people who just welcomed me, encouraged me, loved me, and gave me a sense of dignity. Along, when I say along the way, very randomly along the way. And yeah, so people like Annie Castledine, Catherine Hunter, so many to name, and they guided my sense of ethics of how to be a better person, big challenge, and a more effective artist.
It's really interesting because I've had other artists who've said that the key people have made the difference to their careers,
Yeah,
and actually to foster those relationships is really paramount. You're a storyteller.
yeah.
I know that. Why do you think storytelling is so important to everybody and, of course, to yourself?
Storytelling is stories are fundamentally essential to what it means to be human and what it means to live with dignity. Most of us experience
Yeah, cool. Take your time. I'll just edit anything out that you're not happy with.
most of us experience outsiderness. some more severe than others. And I've come to see and experience that the silencing of your story is what exacerbates outsiderness. So if you can't tell your story, you might as well be a goat. No offense to goats, right? But you know, if you cannot tell your story, you cannot be visible. And if you are invisible, you might as well not exist. And so for me, telling stories is putting flesh on silences. And as an African living in the West, the interaction, our shared history, our common humanity, because of the way history has gone, I've experienced silencing in that way. So stories has always been and will continue to be a way that we can see each other and listen to each other and act upon what we hear, what we fear, and what we dream about. And when I say we, I mean all of we, you know, all of we, beyond the categorization of humanity that we seem so bent on. I know we need categories, but, you know, so that's how I see stories.
Well, I mean, you know, I'm interviewing you today from Together 2012. That is our name. It is about, you know, people coming together and seeing difference as positive, recognizing what all of us have got to offer. So kind of bring it forward, obviously, as an artist who you know, has trod the boards for years, you know, and been in James Bond films with huge roles, I realize.
15 seconds of it.
The pandemic, and you know, the shutting of theatres and the closing down of arts work has hit us all hard. How are you working to come out of that? You know, there's a, you know, we've all had moments of sadness and depression and anxiety, but now we're building. You know, we're hoping, we're looking forward. So, how are you working out the next stage of your story, if you like?
Through a rededication to prayer, through certain discoveries or reflections that I've gone on in the past 18 months, because I think part of an artist's vocation or journey is appreciating that there are seasons. Sometimes they're busy seasons, and sometimes there's a season to rest and to pause, you know. So from what I've learned from that journey, I'm now building or constructing, you know, some of my own work, which is interdisciplinary, quite a number of self-tapes because I'm doing more films now and building that, you know, and I've learned over the last 18 months to write down a list of people that I can call and talk to. You're on that list, by the way, but I haven't got round. I go through them because you don't want to bore people. So I go through them. So I'm getting to you at some point. But we are anyway, Robbie. But because there was a lot of loneliness and stuff like that, I was feeling really isolated. And I literally had to write a list to remind myself that I know wonderful people out there. There are wonderful people out there. But I had to make a practical list. I had to go, you know, oh gosh, there's like, there's at least 20. But they live in different parts of the world. And at the best of times, because of our schedules, we're not engaging. But so all those things, you know, looking at the glass half full is key to me planning the next 10 years when I'll be 70 in 10 years time. So I'm now looking at like how you spend time, the value of time and the value of interaction and the choices I make as a storyteller. A lot I want to do. I have like 3-4 projects now, writing, performing, hot housing. I've got a thing called a lab called the Decolonial Salon, which is about putting an abridged version of a great story, usually a real life story, but using aesthetics and instruments and movements that might not be easily accessible, like in formal learning academies, right? But then, so let's say 40 minutes of that, the next hour is spent with a small audience actually talking about how we put it together, why we put it together, what was the experience of the artists as they were. So not just a post-show discussion, it's actually going into the process and techniques and sounds from maybe a culture that we might not be so familiar with, you know. I've been working on that for about 3 years, and now I'm ready to go. Yeah, so just looking to see how I can put my experiences and what I've learned from my journey, limitations as well as strengths, for the service of others.
Brilliant. I want to say thank you for being so wonderfully open in this interview, and positive, and looking forward to the next 10 years, which,
Yeah.
you know, is something kind of really good to be able to do. I'd like just to ask you to finish with a short monologue, I guess, really.
Well, sometimes I'm asked to go and talk about diversity, which I just use stories that are inspiring stories about how people have engaged with difference, right? So that's how I kind of approach that whole area. And one of the stories I came across recently was a story of a man, American white man called Tom Perelio. He's an American congressman. He had been in Sierra Leone about 20 years ago, dealing with the fallout, peace building after the civil war that had happened. So anyway, he had to travel back to America. I think he's a very close relative had passed. So he's at the airport in Sierra Leone, and this young woman, mother, comes up to him and says, I need you to do a favor. He doesn't know this woman at all. Now, this woman had been, as a Sierra Leonean, had been living in America and had gone back to Africa and had taken her 5-year-old daughter. While she was there, she's an American citizen, but, you know, she went back. While she was there, the child, 5 years old, developed a very serious illness and had to fly back to America instantly. But there was only enough money for one ticket. So she just, by faith, went to the airport. So I don't know how I'm going to get my daughter on this plane. I can't go, but she has to go back. So she said to the people at the desk, who's going to America? So they pointed to Tom Perelio, this white American man. And he's sitting there with his own grief. And so she goes up to him, she says, please, look after my daughter. Get her back to America, please. And so he was like, no, no. And she pleaded with him. And he said, okay. He said he didn't even know what he was doing. So he said, having to take this 5-year-old African child, you know, that he doesn't know, she doesn't know him. Anyway, they get on the plane and the little kid is crying, you know, distraught, obviously having left her mother. So he sings her the only song, African song he knows. and he only knew one verse. And he sings it over and over and over and over again to try to calm the kid down. Anyway, they've got a number of stops and transits and so on and so forth. You can imagine all the issues. Well, who's this child? You know, where you know, how do you know him? Blah blah blah. Anyway, they get to America, and he has to take her through all the customs to get her to the person that was going to pick her up. And in doing that, he missed his flight and missed the funeral that he was going to. Now, the point about the story is, as that 5-year-old child grew up, she knew she had somebody who saved her. And the mother and her were always, who is that guy? Because this was a life-changing moment. And eventually they found him and they reunited. And it's online. His name is Tom Perlio. And it's just a story about, he didn't look at difference. He didn't look at when they went beyond the color of his skin. You know, he just reached out. He just reached out and said, okay, I'm going to help. The mother had to exercise trust and faith in a complete stranger with her child, you know. So that's the story. It's not a monologue, but it's one story that came to mind. And it's a real story, you know, true story. Even when I heard it, it just, you know, it did something to me when I heard that story.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, and a wonderful moment to close on, because that faith, the dignity, the belief, the compassion,
yeah,
and the lack of prejudice, I think we'll finish on that note. So thank you so much, Patrice. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you very much. God bless you and your family, Robin. Thank you for speaking with me and listening to me.